We are on the air. Welcome back. Got all nice and moody all of a sudden. Actually, I'm trying this without a pop filter. I've been having a little bit of technical problems here. And that is, for those of you who don't know, this is a pop filter. It sits in front of your microphone, so when you say the letter P, you don't hear the P. And mine gets in the way. So I'm trying this without the pop filter. So if every time I say the letter P, you want to hold your headphones out, that's why.
And while you're doing that, I'm unbuttoning my belt, or I just did, so that my gut can breathe after my meal.
I was fixing to say, was it another French dip night?
Oh man. Well, no,
Okay.
but I did, eat a lot. So
I think it's a law, especially nowadays. But that kind of dovetails me into something I wanted to ask you about. And that is this whole quarantine, lockdown, COVID thing. Now, I happened to look at the calendar a little bit earlier, and we did the first podcast that we acknowledged what was going on. And that was 32 days ago. We did March 17th was our first episode that we talked about the COVID and the coronavirus and all this other stuff that's been going on. And we did about 2 weeks on it. And that first week, we hammered it pretty hard. We talked a lot about it. And we both had some pretty strong opinions on it. About the reaction and what's going on and what has happened and what is happening and what they say is going to happen. And I just wanted to get your opinion, 62 days later.
Has it been that long?
Yes, it has. It's been 62 days since we first started talking about the coronavirus, since we first started talking about it. And everybody started, all the quarantines and lockdowns and this, that, and the other. And I just kind of wanted to see if you, looking back on what you thought a couple months ago, have any of your opinions or attitudes changed on it as far as people's reaction to it? I mean, at first we joked about it a lot. Everybody was flooding to the store and buying up all the toilet paper and everything, and that's calmed down. But have any of your opinions or attitudes on this entire thing changed over the last 2 months?
It's been like a light bulb or a light turning on in a lowly lit room and brightened a few of my. It reinforced my earlier opinions about society, government, and human behavior. It's reinforced all the things that, and see, the funny thing about it is that I always try to keep that little voice of doubt, on my shoulder that says you could be wrong. So it's not like I'm gun ho for the sake of gun ho, but I have my opinions and stuff. So basically, it has changed. There's a lot to it. I don't know if you want me to be sort of roundabout specific on it, but my opinions have been reinforced from prior to the coronavirus scenario.
Okay. Well, maybe I was a little bit broad in that, and we for sure, everything is open and everything's on the table. But I was thinking more along the lines of, at least what I was thinking about for me was my perception of how people were reacting to this whole thing.
Gotcha.
And, it was a massive case of panic because nobody knew what to do. Nobody knew what was going to happen. And like I said, everybody slammed the stores and started buying anything and everything they can get their hands on, whether they thought they needed it or not.
Okay, so this is what I'm going to, I guess this is the initial thing that I'm going to say. We human beings have been, by on not purpose or whatever, have been sort of molded into, shaped into useless, not completely, but in respect to survival. We've been molded into little, like a pen full of whatever animal you're raising on a farm, because we are not self-sufficient. And the first thing that we went and did, and I'm talking generalization because you can
Sure.
have examples. A lot of people always, when you give, the moment you start saying anything that has a certain opinion or leads down a certain road, people that are contrarians, as an example, and I'm just saying this, societally, will say, "Oh yeah, but how about this and how about that?" And granted, there's a lot of how abouts, but there's little morsels of truth, you know, in everything, apart from errors. But whatever. The point is that I think that we are so not equipped as individuals compared to what we were decades ago and maybe a century ago and so on, even though we had less available to us in comfort, and readily available whatever, food and whatnot. I think that we are at the mercy of the powers that be, minus a conspiracy. Just the reality is that we're always like mama, papa, um, because of the way the structure of the system has. We're dependent on each other so much that it takes one little thing to create a domino effect.
So you're talking about in terms of like self-sufficiency and being able to cook for yourself and being able to take care of your family and your family's needs
We
without having it mostly prepared for you.
Well, yeah, we're connected to the umbilical cord of society, and it's all connected. And I know that we know this already, but I'm just saying, since you asked the question,
Mhm.
it's like, you know, we're stuck in it no matter what, unless you live out in the woods and have land and have, you know, the proper thing, bunch of freezer, whatever the case may be, to get on with it. And even then, you'd survive X amount of time, and that's always going to be the case because we're all
Sure.
intertwined anyhow. I mean, but like major hubs. The fact that I'll just end with this: the fact that people went and bum rushed stores for toilet paper reminds me of, when the airplane, like in those movies, or like when the nuclear movies and the kids in the classrooms. All right, kids, fold over and put your head between your legs, because that's going to stop the ultraviolet, radiation. No, it's more like put your head between your legs and kiss your ass goodbye is what it is. And so it reminded me of like that, like, oh, toilet paper, and people hugging the toilet paper, as if it's such an irrational, for whatever case, it's such an irrational at that level of
Mhm.
all the things that you could possibly start to consume. Meats, totally get it. Water off the shelves, but toilet paper, leave some for, leave some leave some butt wipes for your brothers and sisters out there, folks. Come on.
Yeah, that one struck me as kind of strange too. And by the way, I tend to agree with you strongly on the whole self-sufficiency thing. And you and I talked about that. I mean, I kind of romped and stomped on it a little bit, about the ability to feed yourself. That
Yeah,
microwave meals is not nutrition. Basically, you should know how to cook for yourself and your family.
yeah,
But I'm kind of starting to back off of that because I am seeing people at least try now, and folks who are just within my family and folks that I know are trying. They're at least giving it a shot. And no, it's not going to be perfect, but they realize that it's okay in good times to I won't say rely or depend on community, but there may very well come a time where that community just isn't there and you have to survive yourself. Because you're absolutely right about that. We have been kind of molded and trained um, to rely on the community, to rely on other people, that someone else is going to do it for them. And as you said, mommy, daddy, help me. Well, when that support structure falls away, now what? So I think it has sparked an interest in learning those essential skills. And I am glad to see that. And the overall reaction, I think, was just I got to do something. What do I do? Oh, I'll do this. And yeah, the toilet paper thing, I think, was a major mistake because, when it first happened, it from what I gather, I may be wrong, but from what I've read, it started in Korea because their suppliers, they didn't make toilet paper in Korea, South Korea. Their supply came from China. And when the exports from China stopped, they did run out. And people here started hearing about, oh no, toilet paper shortage, and suddenly it was a mad rush. Well, that calmed down. I still haven't seen any numbers on how many plumbers had to go out and take care of paper towels in the sewer lines, but
Yeah.
we'll see what happens on that. God knows if we'll ever see a number. But we're in some ways we're very spoiled. In other ways we're sheep. We just don't know what else to do.
There's also another. Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
When a situation like this happens, that has never happened before. Something like this has never happened before. And I know people want to make comparisons to 1918 Spanish flu, but this is completely and totally different. And people just panicked. They reacted the only way they knew how. And that was get myself enough stuff to barricade myself in the house for what I think is going to last me a month and do it now. And when that happened, the stores got wiped out.
See, the whole thing is that it also reinforced my views on authority and the utility, to what degree of utility, usefulness is, authority, government. Have we overdone it? Have we given over too much of the reins? It reinforced a lot of my earlier, critiques, because it just so happens when the stuff hit the fans, you're on your own. And we all were. Because it doesn't matter that some guy that's an authority is sitting with a microphone on a TV screen saying, okay, folks, this is in the, at that point, it's made me think of how much even more it reinforced the bull crap fantasy story of necessities from people to tell you what's what and how to this and how to that. And I could get into specifically, but you get the gist of it. We're all here and we have to take care of bottom line. And I think that the systems put in place, leaders, let's say, governmental, are so grotesquely fat and bloated with consumption of other people's, hard labor. And that's not taking away from the fact. I'm not trying to see, this is one of those things that people always, just because I'm saying that, it doesn't mean, I'm not saying that, oh, there shouldn't be any, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any nothing. I'm just saying that it's a big difference from, we're here to manage, and we're here to manage and spend like drunken sailors, and we're here to, abuse our power.
Right.
So to me, and I don't know to how many people that light shine, but maybe I'm already predisposed to it. I see the bullcrap malarkey that all this is. It's all bullcrap. All everything is, and I'll just lay this out there. So I don't know if you. All it all is transfer of money, power, and what. That's all. Everything. I hate to spoil it, kids, and maybe I'm wrong. Everything is a transfer of cash. And how can I draw it from? And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but in this sort of like, sucking the marrow out of the populace, how they've been doing, made it so that people had to live in these times desperate for things because they're being sucked dry as it is. So that's kind of where my mind went.
But on the other side of that coin, do you think that this has kind of, and I'm going to use your metaphor there, do you think that this has kind of turned the light on in that dark room to kind of show just how little we actually need these people? Because for all intents and purposes, we were told you're on your own. We got to do this, and this. And some governors actually came right out and said, shelter in place, stay home, stay safe. We're closing this down, this down, this down, this down. Well, when you're home and left to your own devices, you don't need those officials.
You don't even need them when you're not left to your own devices.
And that's my point, that it illustrated that point. That, okay, yes, a lot of people needed help because their jobs went away. They closed down all the restaurants. So the food service industry basically ended, except for some skeleton crews for those restaurants that could serve at the curb. Mm-hmm. But all of the servers who normally are taking care of tables, they couldn't do that. The bartenders who are serving drinks, they couldn't do that. The stylists who were doing hair or nails, they couldn't do that. So yes, there was legitimate need. Construction was shut down. And so people like our friend Doc, he couldn't go to work. So there is genuine need there on those parts. But when it came down to us having to provide the essentials for ourselves, I'm wondering if you think that this has kind of shown people, you know what? We did this on our own. We didn't really need these bozos.
You know how I would sum it up in a way? Have you ever seen in times of crisis? And there probably were situations like that. I think that there were during this time, but mostly during hurricanes and such, mm-hmm. where they'll come out on the TV or in the papers or on the news or whatever, and they'll say, the store over on, Main Street and whatever, we're price gouging, or the gasoline station over here is price gouging, or this or that. Taking advantage of a situation and creating that price gouging that they say. Well,
I have opinions on that, but that's another story.
Well, here's what I'm thinking, during this time, and mm-hmm. the reason I'm using this is that, to me, that's all fine, but the biggest price gougers are the people that take it from you by force
and tax it. Yeah.
So, my sort of moral of the story with all this, and again, I'm open to suggestions that I'm wrong, always. But my whole thing is that it's all so much bull crap the way the system, because it's totally
sure.
bull hockey. And so as far as people realizing that, I think that the majority of people, whether they know it and ignore it or whatever, is kind of like that Looney Tunes cartoon peacock that sticks his head in the hole.
Oh, the ostrich, yeah.
The ostrich. And they're like, well, in shame and stuff. Well, as opposed to shame, it's just hiding away from the knowledge mm-hmm. of it, because people just want to live. The truth of the matter is, I think that people just want to live and be happy, and so this whole
I agree.
vainglorious into the machine meat grinder. Oh, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, and I gotta be better than, and my car's gotta look better, and this and better and all that stuff. That's fine if that's a person's, because we're all free to follow our desires, but the amount of bull, that's what it's taught me. It reaffirms certain beliefs.
Yeah. It made a lot of people, I think, it made a lot of people re-examine their priorities.
Yeah.
I really do think so. I think it made a lot of people kind of open their eyes a little bit. And because we have been, I mean, and I'm 59 years old. So in my lifetime, I watched while I was in school. It was happening between fifth or sixth grade when I started caring and paying attention to stuff. And by the time I got out of high school, I watched it change from teaching self-reliance to rely on the community. And so it's been instilled in people for a couple of generations now that the government's going to take care of you. And I've made this comparison before that I remember the footage from Hurricane Katrina, and I've talked about this a couple of times, where you had people up on roofs of houses in America with signs made out of sheets and shoe polish saying, "Help me." And you had other people hanging from helicopters and holding out the hand to help. And I've often thought, which one of those two people do you want to be? That you've got a little bit of self-responsibility if you plan on having any self-respect, and constantly having a handout to accept the table scraps of others is no way to have self-respect. And maybe this kind of thing has opened a few folks' eyes to that, in that I didn't know squat about even how to take care of myself. And maybe I just need to kind of learn some of that stuff. I don't know. I still think, I mean, I went on record 2 months ago in saying that I think that a lot of this was a huge overreaction. I still think a lot of it was overreaction, because I don't think anybody 2,500 miles away in a glittering city on a hill can tell me what's best for the Rogue Valley in Southern Oregon. They can't tell you what's best for Sweetwater, Florida.
Even the locals can't tell you what's best.
Right, because you have to be, you're the only one that can look around and see what your situation is and what your condition is. They can't tell you what's right for you. You have to make that determination yourself. And if you don't know how, that's a bigger problem than any virus, because it doesn't even take a virus to, one leg of that support structure gone, your whole house of cards tumbles.
The whole idea of what happened here and the decisions that were made are admittedly out of my domain, because there's a lot of intricacies involved and all that. So I can't, judge, the lockdown, was it extreme? Was it not extreme? But they managed to lock it down. And that's an extraordinary amount of power. And so was it overblown or not? We can't know what would have been, but
no, there's no way to quantify that. Yeah.
We can't, right. So I was for locking it down. because to prevent, and, and so, but the damage is massive. But at the same time, it's all so much bull if you think of what money is, what
Well,
money really is, what
yeah,
the structure is. If you really, well, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, but people do have to eat. They do have to be able to feed themselves. And if you've been out of work for 60 days with no income at all, I mean, just think of the guys that run the food trucks. They've had to shut down, and that was their living. That was how they fed themselves. They've got zero income coming in.
Well, I'm not arguing. No, no,
So,
but I wasn't arguing that. I wasn't
yeah.
arguing that. Just to
So,
let you know, I'm not arguing
no,
that.
I understand that. All I'm saying is there were people in genuine hurt. There were people in genuine need, and there still are today. There's a lot of them. There's like 20 million people out of work right now. That was just in April. 20 million jobs lost. It is temporary, but nothing like this has ever happened before. So I guess what I'm getting at is I think there was a bit of overreaction. There's a huge overreaction on the part of the public at large. But I think there was a bit of overreaction by government and our so-called leaders. I think there are some things they could have handled better. I think there are some things they overhandled. They didn't do a very good job on. But again, they're people. And you can read all the books in the world. You can have all the advisors in the world. You can talk to every expert in the world. But when nobody has ever dealt with a situation like this before, we're just one country out of 200 and some odd on the planet. Nobody has ever dealt with this kind of a situation, and every country has had a different outcome. So what do you do? I mean, they just didn't know. So they reacted the only way they knew, the way they thought was best. I don't know. I can criticize some of it. I can't criticize other parts of it. But I have to remain intellectually honest and say, so long as they did it the right way, the legal way, then I'm fine with it. I have to be fine with it because I'm basically choiceless.
Yeah, my critique isn't, although I guess if I were to sit and examine it, but it's not as much as the shutting down to be preventative and to avoid, more people, but it's more like, the illuminated, uselessness and over bloated, way that they spend money in our name and misuse it. We're human after all, but it just somehow it always ends up that people that end up in positions of power just, because you
Well,
can't,
yeah.
like you said, you can't make decisions that'll please everybody. And if that's the case, in my opinion, then if you can't please everybody, then whatever you do it, from the least aggressive. I believe that it should be from the least aggressive, because
Yeah.
people at this point, can they afford, now that they've been out this time, can they afford to even deal with the impositions that government itself requires? It just opened up a Pandora's box in my mind, that was already open, but like it's like, oh, look at this, and I'm amazed that nobody has mentioned it. I haven't really seen much conversation on that personally.
I think that's coming. I really do. I think that's coming. See, we have the luxury right now, and that's the whole point of what I was talking about, or the subject I brought up was looking back in hindsight over the last 62 days that we've been talking about it, and have our minds been changed from anything we said 62 days ago, you know. Um, and I think the discussions are only beginning, and they're going to keep coming, and they're going to get louder, and they're going to get more raucous, and they're going to get more sharp tongued. And we know that's coming. And so are a whole slew of lawsuits. I mean, there already are. Talking about overreactions and overstepping the bounds of authority. right here in my state, there was a lawsuit that was heard by the state Supreme Court yesterday. The state Supreme Court agreed to hear the case. A lower court ruled that the governor overstepped her bounds and overstepped her authority, that under a declaration of an emergency, she has certain powers under quarantine, but those powers are only valid for 30 days. If it's going to last more than 30 days, she cannot extend the closure, the lockdown, the quarantine, whatever you want to call it, without a 3/5 majority vote of both houses of the state legislature.
Right.
She did it anyway. And a bunch of pastors brought it to court. Well, a lower court ruled that, yes, she overstepped her authority and that it was blatant and cut and dried. And he declared the lockdown order null and void. So for a few hours, our lockdown was released, was gone. It was just null and void. They argued the case. When they lost, they argued the case in front of the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court said, we will hear the case of the plaintiff, but we're going to remove that stay and leave the lockdown in place. But she still has to get the legislature's approval. So where we are right this minute, that's where we're sitting right now. The lockdown is still in place, but the court is going to hear the case and make a decision on it. Now, that's what I mean by being intellectually honest. I'm not saying I'm for a lockdown or I'm against a lockdown. What I'm saying is she's got to do it legally. And if she didn't do it legally, it needs to be thrown out and she needs to do it legally. You know, we can't have people overstepping their authority and just saying it's for your security.
I don't know why
that game's been played before, and the ending was not a good one.
I don't know why more people, maybe it's just me in this area, but that whole, when these people that are, I'm the authority around here, I'm going to tell you what's what, and you just listen to what I got, listen to how I say it, and you're going to do it like this. And I don't know how more people don't feel repulsed by that whole type of individual.
I think they are. I think they're starting to.
It's like, you know what, man, just, it's too much. It's like over the top.
Dude, I'm looking at my Facebook feed and members of my family who would have never said a word against this governor, who would have kissed the ground she walked on 6 months ago, they want to burn her at the stake. It's come to that point. I mean, a lot of people, their eyes have been opened as to how people really are.
I need to use the restroom really quickly.
You're going to do this? Well, it's your edit, so you take your time.
I'll be right back.
I hope you mute your microphone so we're not listening to the dulcet tones of Eloy. This is funny. He doesn't do that very often. Let's see what we got going on in the chat. Hi, everybody. How you doing? I see you, Frankie. I see you, Billy Burt, Mr. Russ Meadows, Jim Dockerel. Be careful. Dave Clemens. How you doing? Mr. Big D, Steve Nealon, Harneal Media himself. How you doing, sir? My baby Linda Lindsay. And let's see who else we got down here. We got the usual list of suspects. I saw Jim Bashir's in here earlier. I'm just seeing if he's still hanging around. And the Snow Crusher, the Crusher himself. So I see our north of the border contingent is well represented. All right. Looks like we got the usual cast of characters. Too much coffee. I can't speak for him. But he did just finish dinner, so there was probably a large beverage involved. This is going to be such a fun edit for him. So for those of you who are wondering where the devil that title came from, It was a strange hat that was pulled out of the ugly Ignoramus and Pepe the dancing turtle. And as I have shown, I like turtles.
All right. So I see where you went. You went into the title.
Did you ever see that meme? It was
I like turtles.
I'll have I'll have to find the clip. It's on YouTube. There's some reporterette up in Portland was interviewing, people at some kind of a street event, and she there's this long big wind up and everything, and there's this kid in makeup and everything. He's just standing there, and she's talking about this fair and how fun it is, and this, that, and the other, and she holds the microphone down, and he just looks at her and goes, "I like turtles."
Yeah.
That was all he said. So now I got to find that clip and put it over on our Facebook page.
It was great. Yeah.
Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook. Learn it, love it, live it. Come visit us.
I just, with the whole conversation that, we all live, we're born, we grow, we live, and then we go where we do not know, but a lot of people have certain ideas that are pretty strongly grounded. No pun intended. And I think that for the most part, human beings, they kind of, nobody, it's not like we're bumbling idiots and stuff. We do the best with what we have. So on a lighter note within it, people make huge errors that aren't agreeable to others, to some segments of society and all that. And there is a level of, nudging that, and forgiveness that you can have, and which I have, because at the end of the day, I look at any human being and I put myself in their shoes. For the most part, I do this because, I understand how fragile life is, and, I'm in many ways, affected by it, on a personal level because
Sure.
of my family, and past people that have passed. And so, but then again, we're such a contradiction, human beings. We have a little voice going on inside our heads, giving us information. And then we wake up and we're dressed in tights in the middle of downtown with a funny hat, and I don't know how that happened. No, but we all have, a conscience that tells us hey, you're going too far, you're not going far enough. And then there's different degrees of that. And then you have your outright, psychopaths and really screwed up people and stuff that are away from the center line of what people deem as the norm. And but so the point is that for me, boy, we've got a time, and I figure, it's best not to, it's to try to avoid, terrible, outcomes, and just take it easy and not be abusive and just all these things, but of course I'm just one guy that thinks that way, and I too can contradict. Like John Lennon, he had a song called Revolution 9 or Revolution. And it goes, they say, you want a revolution way. Well, in one segment, he says, and if you want people if you want people for money, that's something, I forget the lyric. But he's talking about war, and he says, and you can count me out.
Oh,
he says, but then he says,
when you talk about destruction, don't you know that you can count me out?
Okay, so let me repeat this. So he goes, and when you talk about destruction, you know that you can count me out.
That's right.
In. And you know what's going to be. So he says, you can count me out. And then he says, in. And he was questioned about that. And John Lennon was not my favorite of the Beatles. And do you love how I segmented out into something softer? He's not my favorite of the Beatles, but and you'll see why. but he had a genius that was crazy. And what he was saying in that song is, if you talk about destruction or whatever, you can count me out. And then he says in, and he was questioned about it, and he said, well, I'm a human. He says, well, I believe in peace, and so if you talk about destruction, you can count me out, but I'm also human and I'm liable to change, and we have these faults. So I said, you can count me out in. And I found that such an artistically awesome and honest and, like, Easter egg
Well,
inside of the song,
yeah.
that it was
Well,
a great thing.
I mean,
And,
we all
that's
have
how I feel. That's how I feel about life.
we all have our own moral compasses, and everybody's needle is calibrated, to swing somewhere close to north. And, it remains to be seen as to whether or not they're all pointing the same direction or not. I don't believe they are. But you basically have to decide what's best for you, and you can't rely on other folks to make that choice for you.
Yeah.
So before we move on to another topic, if you have one, I'd just like to.
I don't. So
Oh,
keep.
okay. All right. Well, I just wanted to know that since we've both been through this for 62 days so far, and it's not over yet. This is not a goodbye. This is just a 2-month update. Since we've both been through this, looking back on what it was like before and now during, would you have done anything differently before in hindsight? Is there anything like, yeah, I could have been a little bit more prepared for that? Or, yeah, I could have been a little bit more prepared for this. Is there anything you can think of that you would have done a little bit differently?
I could have been more prepared with canned foods and other, nutrition and supplements, for sure. Let me see. I think that basically that would be about it. In reality, there's a whole host of things, that one could that one could use in times like these if things went south really bad. But in hindsight, with what it was and what it is, there was plenty of food and still is.
Yeah.
So in hindsight, we're still connected with each other in society to the point of, for any real longevity, sustainability, we all need each other. That part is true currently. And it was 100 years ago as well.
Yeah.
Although, because you'd have people, like using Maliano in Spain as an example, since I've been reading about it. You'd have ladies coming down from the mountains bringing milk, because they'd have all their cows up there, and they'd bring down these huge containers of milk to the city, or to the roadside, better said, and then they'd come in wagons and they'd pay them, and they'd take that milk to the city. Some would go to the city, and so it was all interconnected. Right. Is what I'm trying to get at. So even back then, you wouldn't have in the city, you might have, but generally speaking, you're not going to have like a cow sitting there for your milk. So you'd have people bringing down.
Sure.
So we're all interconnected anyhow.
Sure.
So I don't know, other than having more canned food, I don't know what else, other than living in the woods.
Well, one of the things that it has taught me is that to be a little bit less, I hesitate to say relaxed, but start prioritizing things a little more and stop putting off things. Because like with us, it was a case of bad timing. Our freezer went out. And legitimately, it died. I mean, we got everything out of the freezer and put into our other freezer, the freezer on top of our fridge. But we've still got this big broken thing out on the back porch next to the washing machine that, it's an indoor porch, but it's the back porch nonetheless, that doesn't work. It's just taking up space. And you can't steal a freezer around here. Everybody went out and bought one. So But there was a time period between the time it went out and the time we decided to go buy a freezer. I should have put a little bit more emphasis on getting that freezer replaced earlier. So what I'm saying is kind of re-establish my priorities and quit saying I can do that tomorrow.
Did you know
Because
that you can cut open that freezer, the outer hull, which is typically some sort of metal or plastic, but you can break through, or coated plastic, I guess like that
yeah.
that textured, you could rip that, and inside there's this batting, and you could pull that, and it's good for toilet paper.
Oh yeah. 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 And yeah, that works. But
And
it just so happened.
There's plenty all around it, so you could
Oh
keep,
yeah.
you could just pull from, you could open a crack and just pull from.
So it basically made me learn to, if I need to do something, get it done. You know, because of course, about the time we decided we wanted to go ahead and replace that freezer, so did the rest of the world, and there are none to be had. Still, right now, there are still no freezers available in this valley at all. And we've checked all of the places.
You mean freezers like ice boxes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Upright or the chest type, any of them. Forget it. They're gone. The warehouses are out. And, you just can't get one. So I should have replaced that during that space before this thing started. So it's made me prioritize to go ahead and get stuff done and quit putting it off until tomorrow. It's lots of people can talk a good ride. Get on the horse and do it.
It's funny. I'm not, before you said talk a good ride, I don't know why, but in my mind, how pictures are always popping up as you're talking, and things, the brain does what it does. Before you said, and I don't know if it was like a psychic thing or not, but I saw in my mind, for some reason, before you said it, unless I'm kind of slow and you said it and I think that I thought it first, but I don't think so. I pictured a guy sitting on a horse riding, for some reason. I don't know. Maybe it's sensitive. And then you said, get on and ride. I was like, what? I know it sounds ridiculous, but so either I'm just like, I have a delay in my head, and then I
welcome to the Twilight Zone.
That's another thing. I do think that there's something non-tangible in a logical way about human beings and our connection and our existence and everything. But then again, that could be a total illusion, whatever that means. But I totally think that there's something on a spiritual level. I don't know what that is, and it's not like I'm going off the rails here, going crazy about it. But I tend to be the kind of person that thinks a little bit more reverently about the possibility of something beyond the known. Well, you could tell by the past episodes of
couple episodes, have proven that.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, so I don't know where I was going with that, other than,
well, maybe it was the freakiness of you thinking horse when I said horse.
Yeah,
and I think what's more likely is that we remember things like that. It was sheer coincidence. You had an image in your brain about horses, and I said something about a horse, and you remember that because it stands out. But you don't remember the last 2 years of where you were thinking something completely different than what I said.
Right. That makes sense. Well, just talking about horses for half a second, and this whole thing, and they found, and I don't know how recent it is, but I ran across the video, a Viking ship in Norway. And so they're using all this technology, and they're going to work on digging it up. And the Viking ship was buried, because what they would do is apparently bury the guy that was like a bad to the bone dude.
Yeah.
And gal, because they found one with a lady Viking. Well, they would dig a hole, or something like that, or mounded up, whatever, half and half. I don't know but the combination of dirt but they would bury a whole freaking Viking ship
Mm-hmm.
with the dude,
Mm-hmm.
his weaponry, and
Yep.
in the case of the one that they found, a bunch of horses, dogs, and all sorts of stuff in there. And they said, yeah, he was buried with all these creatures. Now, see, when I saw that, the first thought in my mind, okay, I'm going to ask you, I'll tell you what my thought was, but
Okay.
just get this. What happens is, I'm going to ask you the question, and then I want to hear what your first thought is. Don't, until I ask the
Okay.
question, then tell me what the first. So a dude dies, Viking dude dies. His tribal people come up and say, the clan comes up and says, okay, this guy Erickson, the fifth, whatever, we have to bury him and honorably. Let's take his ship over there in the bay and drag that puppy out of the water. Okay, guy, and then we're gonna bury it. So they buried it. They found the ship with horses, dogs, weaponry, and everything. What would be the first question that would intrigue you? I know what my first question would be, which I'll tell you, but what would be yours?
Who was he?
You
Who
see?
was he? See, I know a little bit. I know a little bit about this, not a lot, but I do know a little bit about it. And I do know that that was only done for extremely important people, for chiefs and chieftains.
Okay.
And we've got this idea in our head about how they put the body in the ship and then they pushed it out to sea and lit it on fire
Mhm.
and sent them off to Valhalla that way. That in recorded history has happened one time that they know for sure. But it was legendary, and this guy was a humongous leader. But they've only got written accounts of it happening one time. The rest is just like you described. They were buried with certain numbers of animals, and if it was their mate was with them, or maybe it wasn't their mate, they really are not sure.
Right.
But more often than not, it was
Hey,
done in the way
Tabitha.
you described.
Tabitha. Yeah. Bob over there. He just we're doing the burial thing. Come over here. Well, what do you need? Come on,
Yeah, well,
come over here.
there's evidence that some cases it was a slave that was buried with him. So, of the opposite sex, and you can draw your own conclusions from there. But the that would be my first question: is who was it?
Okay.
Is there
Fair enough.
any way to find out who that was?
Well, fair enough. So you see, I grant you that is a vital, part of the, when you hear this. But that was not my first thought that popped into my head when I thought. Can you guess what I thought?
Why'd they kill the horses?
Yes, that's what would that have been your second thing? Now, see, here's the thing. I thought, did they bury all these animals alive because they couldn't have all died at the same time, or did they
Yeah.
off them and then put them in there? And
Yes.
it's like, if that's the case, it's like, I was thinking, man, did they kill all those animals just to bury the freaking guy? I mean,
Yes.
let the animals freaking roam. That was my first thought.
They were like his special animals.
Right, but it's like,
And
for goodness sakes, man.
well, you got to remember, this is kind of like
Tell that to the horse. Tell that to the horse. Tell it to
you
the
know,
horse.
you didn't take a chief or chieftain's when the chief or chieftain died, his rule ended. So everything basically associated with him went with him. Nobody else was worthy of riding this chief's horse.
So you're saying
Nobody else was worthy of taking this chief's weapons.
so that
So
horse sitting in the
they went
stall.
with him. Yes.
So that horse sitting. So that horse sitting in the stall. He hears, ugh, and the chieftain falls, and he looks, and the horse sticks his head out, and he's like, "Oh crap!" So
Yeah. Basically, I mean, his dogs, his animals that were special to him. Yes.
dude,
Now, more times than not, the usually the chief was a male and the warrior was a male, but not
Yeah.
always, as you said.
Yeah.
Their wives were spared unless the wife wanted to go to Valhalla with him. Then they sacrificed themselves. And so they could be buried with their husbands.
Well,
And sometimes slaves were sacrificed and buried with them. But so my question would be, who was he? Not where did all these people and animals come from? Because I know a little bit about that stuff and I know why they did it. But that's the way it was seen. It was seen as a form of respect that no one else was worthy to ride his horse in his saddle and carry his weapons.
well,
That was him. That was his rule. That was his reign. They go with him to Valhalla. And now the new chieftain comes along with his horse, his saddle, his wife, his weapons, and he's going to take over.
that new horse is probably like, you
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. I didn't sign up for this,
Yeah. Because I don't know, I don't care who you are, that horse, is thinking of his own butt, as well. They don't know any difference, or probably they do. I don't know. So yeah, so that was a good little divergence into that.
Well, and it's interesting to get into that kind of thing. I don't know a whole heck of a lot about Norse history or mythology. I know a little bit, but just enough to make me dangerous. But it is something that I am interested in. I need to study up on it more.
I dig the whole. Obviously, it's a long history. I've been enjoying the history of Europe and stuff. I've been focused, obviously, I've always liked the English history, always, but lately I've discovered the Spanish history because I've been delving into it and I've been enjoying the heck out of it. And it's such a long and extended and there's so many.
It's a deep rabbit hole.
It's such a deep rabbit hole. And kings warring against brother kings against siblings. Like the story that occurred all throughout Europe. I mean, everybody wants power.
Yeah. And we tend to think of ourselves. I mean, you're an only child. You don't have any brothers or sisters. But the perception is that brothers and sisters are supposed to be friends and love one another.
Right.
Everybody has spats. Yeah, I argued with my brother constantly growing up, and we fought and everything else. I mean, to the point of beating the heck out of each other. It was even worse back then because a favorite brother would become king and another brother wouldn't become king. He'd become jealous, and the king brother would send him off to do some kind of a crap job in a title, and the conspiracy started. If I kill him, I'm next in line. I'll be king. So it was vicious back then, but that's how they came to power. Now, did you ever get into Celtic mythology, the mythology of Ireland or Scotland?
I haven't gone into that other than tracing the travel of the Celts from Central Europe, and then expanding out, like basically in terms of DNA, but I've not sat through all the mythologies.
Let me save you a little bit of grief and headache. Unless you are intensely into wanting to learn about Celtic mythology, don't even start. You think the royal line in England from William the Conqueror down is a convoluted and confusing story? Celtic mythology will pick you up, beat you severely about the head and shoulders, and jump on you 52 times. It is some confusing, convoluted stuff. And they all have Celtic names that are impossible for anybody to pronounce. So just fair warning.
I will get into it one day because I really do love the history. So I've not gotten into much of, other than I guess, colonial times in South America, which we've talked about in the past. My main enjoyment has always been medieval Europe, and mostly English, or British, but mostly kind of like English and the Scots and stuff. And then it's been a little bit of, it's kind of daunting in the French scenario, that's another place that one wants to explore. I'm in the Spanish right now, but I do want to. I don't know where. I want that whole Western Europe. I want to have a good, complete overview of all Western Europe. There's Russia to deal with. There's Eastern Europe. There's, the Roman age, which I've delved into a little bit, but I enjoy history. It's just that there's so much, and South America too, and then the Incas. I just like the story of man, you know, through time, and the things that occurred to lead us to where we are now. It's just such an awesome. I just love it so much.
You'd have
So
been
yeah,
good.
so I would definitely go in that direction at one point.
You'd have been a good anthropologist or archaeologist if that's really where your interests lie.
I enjoy it. Maybe it's more like a hobby, but I like feeding the mind. For some reason, I like that. I like biographies. I like stuff that has to do with things that have occurred.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I like. I don't know if I'd be any good if I had to go to the frickin' site and stuff, and like the mosquito.
Oh, are you kidding me? You would have an absolute blast. All right, think about this, okay? Let me put you in a situation. You're over in Germany, and you have found, and you have complete permission. Their permits and getting permission are not a factor, but you have the opportunity to be the first one to open up a bunker for the first time since World War II. You're going to tell me that you would turn that down and you wouldn't be excited about it?
No, I would definitely be there. I mean, so I've mentioned it before, but just to mention it in case no one's has heard it, that's listening in now. So I had a great uncle that I never met because he's from like back in the day. He died in 1936,
Okay.
but so he was my grandfather's uncle. Let's put it that way. So he'd be my great uncle or something like that, whatever the case. Great uncle, because he was the brother of my grandfather. He was the brother of my grandfather's father.
Okay.
And he was bestowed chronicler of Spain. Has various independent autonomous communities, just like what we would call states here in the United States. And in the north, there's Cantabria. And he was named the official chronicler of the area. And what that involved was that he was given it because he went from town to town digging out books from private houses, the private stashes, and grabbing the old manuscripts, and he would translate them and post them. And post, when I say post, it sounds like Facebook, but he'd post them to the bulletins and periodicals of the time and all that. And a part of what he would do is he'd go into the mountains, because Spain has a lot in the north, a lot of cave paintings and fossils, and he'd go in and explore the caves, and they take along, the chronicler, and they take along, the actual, what you call, people that open
archaeologists.
Archaeologists. They take a group of people to do. And my grandfather was lucky enough in his childhood to be taken along with him. He was with Mateo, the priest, and he'd enter into, my grandfather, and I was little, and he told me they entered into, this wasn't a cave, this was an actual burial coffin made out of, cement or rock or whatever, because their whole thing was cataloging, who was who, kings, queens. I mean, he was privy to a lot of the people from Europe coming through, and he said that they opened the coffin, and they were all there waiting and stuff. And I forget who it was, whose coffin, but when it opened it, it was dust. In my memory, he said it turned to dust. Now, that's what I remember magically in my mind, that it could very well be, but that there was nothing, was dust. It had become dust. I think he did say that. It's been a long time, but he says once they opened it and air touched it, it became nothing. It was like just crap. And so he would do that kind of stuff. And I think that a lot of that curiosity comes from transferred from him.
Hearing those stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's wow. I mean, what do you say to that? How do you follow that? And this was Mateo the priest.
Mateo the priest. On
The
his plaque, it says, like his inscription is chronicler of the this, of the this, of the valley, of the this, of the that, of the that, like a
yeah,
big,
he
you know,
was pretty revered both in his time and long after, because I mean, there's a street named after him, obviously, there in Santander,
there's a
and
museum.
a museum to him.
He's got a school, two schools named after him, a museum,
Mm-hmm.
and a museum in a place called Santillana
Mm-hmm.
del Mar. He's got a museum. He's got a couple of roads named after. He was an important figure because he took up the thing of exploring on his own to figure out who was who. And ever since then, there have come Johnny come latelys, which I've noticed as I'm studying. Like, I don't know the politics behind it, but I've
Sure.
noticed. And there's people that come, well, no, he didn't write this like this. It should have been like that. And this, and like the same stuff we see
Yeah.
on YouTube.
Yeah.
You know, I can't, you know, you need a $500 saw to do that, you know, and you see these. So that whole sort of attitude isn't just in woodworking. It's like across the board,
Oh yeah.
you know, so it's an interesting, you know, and I grew up hearing the stories about him and all that. And, you know, I mean,
So there's adventure in your soul.
yeah, I think so. I think so. Or at least from the comfort of an air conditioned, climate controlled room.
Yeah.
Because if you put all these people from back in the day in a room like what we got, as minimalistic as this might be, this is like the best.
Yeah, well, but I think, to be honest with you, I think they would probably hate it, because their mindsets were different than ours. Ours is comfort. Theirs was labor. You had to have value as a person, you know? So the ability to sit in air conditioned comfort and do things at your leisure, I think would have been totally foreign to them, because they just didn't know that way of life.
Well, you know, I mean,
Now, as far as recreation is concerned, or when it comes time to go in the house and go to sleep, eat dinner and go to sleep, yeah, I'm sure they'd have loved it.
so you're saying so
But
like let's say
as
they walk, so they walk into the bathroom and like they're standing there with their old times, and you say all you got to do is just flush, and then they hear it and they take out their axe and go and they break it and stuff, and they're like, that's
dude,
evil. That's something
in
satanic.
my lifetime, my great grandfather refused to have a toilet in the house. Toilets are unsanitary. I don't care if there's a pipe underneath it. It's unsanitary. It has no place in the house. They had an outhouse. This is my great grandmother and great grandfather. He died in 1966. She passed in 92 or 3. And he grudgingly, she finally put her foot down. He finally, as a compromise, built a bathroom on the back porch. It was a covered porch, but he built a bathroom on the back porch and ran plumbing to it. You had to go outside of the house, out one door onto the back porch, and through another door into the bathroom to use the bathroom. But he refused to have a toilet in the house because they were filthy, they were dirty, they were unsanitary.
I mean, he's not
People
wrong.
got sick. No, he's not wrong. So what I'm getting at is, they might have taken an axe to it by telling you were filthy, and that business had no business in the house. You did your business out away from the house, you know? So, but what I'm getting at is, it's still, even in my lifetime, my grandparents were of the opinion that when you got up in the morning, you got up, you had breakfast, you got dressed, and you went out to work. You could come back in for lunch, but then you were back out working again until it was supper time. Then you came in for supper. Then you could wind down and you could be in the house doing whatever. But if it was daylight and you were up and you were awake, you were outside working, doing something.
See,
Because there was always something to be done.
I could totally see back in the day, like let's say early 1900s, couple of guys leaning up against their horses or carriages, waiting to take some people on a ride in a major city. And they see this bozo coming down with this little gasoline powered putt. And they're like, oh, do you see that? You see that, John? How ridiculous is this guy? Oh, yeah. We've got this on lockdown. And so, the moral of the story of humanity, as you see we don't know what's going to be and what's not going to be. I mean, so it's such a fantastical thing, where life takes turns. It's just, cameras.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I've heard that Indians there'd be like, do not take, not everybody, but that there was tribes, I guess, that would say that would capture your soul, and that was no good, as an example.
I've heard that too. I don't know how much of it is true and how much of it is white people romanticizing the Native Americans and projecting onto them, I've never had any personal experience, and I doubt, very many people alive today would have had that personal experience with anybody, but it was never experienced a camera before. But I mean, there were so many things, so many advances in technology, who's to say? I mean, there were people back in the day who didn't want that electricity in their house. You use candles like it was intended. You use candles and lamps. That electricity was dangerous stuff. It can shock somebody and kill them.
I got a story about that too.
You're supposed to use fire like God intended,
So in the early 1900s in Cuba, in Aguada de Pasajeros, Cuba, they had gas for lighting and stuff, and some people didn't. They just had it all depended. And three brothers, one of them was my great grandfather, the other two were his brothers, and actually there were four, because there was the sister as well. They all, I don't know exactly, but they pulled together and they opened up the first electrical plant to feed electricity to the area. And my father left a written account of it before he passed away, those details, which I was very lucky to have, because I was like, oh, okay. And when they started in that town, they offered it for free so that people could test it in their houses. And a lot of people were saying, no, that is very volatile, dangerous stuff.
Yep.
And they wouldn't have it. But as time progressed, people, and they would only turn it on for a certain amount of times. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like it was running 24 hours like what we're accustomed to now. But they would turn it on, and then they would shut it off at a certain time, whatever that time was. And it got to the point where they became the electricity of the town, where a saying was created, which was, until Uraldes, which is the last name, Uraldes, until Uraldes turn on the lights. And it was a saying that was used in typical day-to-day. They would use it like saying, I can't believe that happened. Well, yeah, until Uraldes turns on the light, as sort of like a little saying in between the. And then an American company that was named the Cuban electrical company, whatever, mm-hmm. came in and bought them out, threatening that if they didn't sell, that they would build their own plant, and they would make them have to sell their electricity so cheaply that they'd run out of business, so that it was better for them to sell. So they ended up selling to that company that was Cuban only by name, as my father wrote, and it ended up that there went the way of the electricity in Aguada de Pasajeros, Cuba.
Wow. That is actually very, very cool. I mean, it's not good how it ended, but it's very cool. I mean, they saw the need. They figured out a way to fill that need.
And in a time where it wasn't even, because electricity really, it was, I mean, I would think like, whoa, no, I'd rather do the gas powered because I know that's
Yeah, yeah. I know how to work that so it's safe. I know what to do and what not to do with that. Yeah.
yeah.
There was somebody can correct me on this. Well, no, don't even bother to correct me. You can educate me on this. One of the presidents ran electricity in the White House. And then after his term was up and he was voted out of office and he left, the next president took it out because he didn't like it. And then, like two presidents down the road, they brought it back in.
That's funny.
So
Well, because
I
I mean,
don't remember which presidents it was.
that's hilarious because it's something that obviously any of us
Mhm.
are looking at all these advances from our vantage point, which
Yeah.
is why not?
Mm-hmm.
But back in the day,
Well,
I mean,
it was a new mystical power source that you couldn't see. It was invisible and nobody understood it. All they knew is if they touched that, they got a zap and that could kill somebody.
well, yeah,
And there was no standardization. So some of it was AC, some of it was DC, some of it was 4 volts, some of it was 120 volts. I mean, there was no standardization. So it was pretty sketchy. I mean, we talk about the wonders of the Transcontinental Railroad. They were the biggest death traps on the road because there was no standardization. There was no safety criteria. If there was a railroad accident, dozens of people died because there was just no standardization when it came to safety or anything like that. There was no regulation at all. And when you get killed out in the middle of North Dakota in a railroad accident, it may be 6 months before anybody but the railroad knows about it, you know?
right. But at that
So,
point,
you know, it
nobody at that doesn't matter where you bite the big one.
no,
You know,
you know, I mean,
that's the whole thing.
steam engines exploded. I mean, boiler tanks burst and things like that. I mean, it was not a safe modern way of travel. It was the
Yeah,
best they had at the time, but you know, what can you say?
my grandfather got run over by my great grandfather. Felix got run over. Like I know so much of the stories now. Got run over by a trolley.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how he died.
Oh, jeez. I know. I didn't know that.
My great grandfather Felix Escagedo Salmon, he was working in the fields, and by the way, I knew that story from my father, and then I talked to my cousin in Spain, which I keep contact with currently, and her mother remembered from when she was a little girl
Oh, wow.
my great grandfather getting run over
Oh,
because they
wow.
were kids going to school, and the news, it's a small place, the news was heard everywhere that he had got. The thing is that, as her mom told her and then she told me, is that he was bad of hearing at his age and couldn't hear. And back then, these trolleys, they're like those I guess you could call it trolleys or carts, some sort of, I don't
Uh-huh.
know, it's not a train, but it's one of those,
Yeah.
they would run through fields in the middle of nowhere, and that's just how it was. And one of these fields was my great grandfather working, and he didn't hear it, and it struck him, and he passed away like that. So yeah, these trolleys, they installed something new that didn't exist before.
Hmm.
I'm sure that the trolleys had been around for a while, at that point, because he died sometime he was born in the 1800s, ended up passing away sometime in 1950, 49, something like that. So they probably had it for quite a while. He didn't hear it and he got hit. But
Jeez.
these
Yeah.
inventions, that you put in place could be deadly,
Yeah. Yeah.
although that
Mm.
wasn't the fault of the machine,
No, it was the person driving it, or it just could have been circumstance. I mean, it's
Yeah,
possible that they just didn't see one another, and that was until it was too late.
yeah.
You know. Um, well, I can't compare to that, but my wife got ran over by a helicopter.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. When
And Linda?
that would yes, Linda, that was the day we met.
Oh boy.
Let me set the scene for you. We were stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I was in one unit, 4th Battalion, 101st Aviation. She was in another unit across the airfield from me, 6th Battalion, 101st Aviation. And we had a mutual friend in my unit. And Linda came over to my hangar to visit this mutual friend, and we were all out on the flight line getting ready to push a helicopter into the hangar, put the wheels on it, and I was on the back end holding the tail. I would be the one steering. And got it up on its wheels, lifted everything up, and about 6 of us started pushing in. Well, she ran up and grabbed a hold of the back end of the aircraft where it's stenciled on it, no push. And when she did that, I didn't see her there. I turned the helicopter to guide it into the hangar, and one of the ground handling wheels went right up over her foot.
Oh, geez. Is that Linda? Is that was love striking you?
Yeah. Well, I tried to warn her. I said, I certainly wouldn't stand her and do that. So
I can't believe that. I don't mean to be it's such a weird scenario that it's just like, so how'd you meet? Well,
I ran over her with a helicopter.
That's incredible.
And she tells her friends that she decided that anybody with an approach like that was somebody worth getting to know. And we've been married 32 years now. So
that's incredible.
I mean, that's why they stencil it there in big letters, no push. They don't have room to write a whole explanation as to why you don't stand there and push from that spot.
Did you? But you know, see, what I'm not hearing
there
from you, and I don't mean to put you in a bind here. But what I'm not hearing from you is, you know, the poetic license that you're free to. So you rushed over, and then like Gone with the Wind violin started to play in the air. I mean, I want to, you know, I don't want just the birds. I want to know.
To be honest, I didn't know that it happened until after the fact.
Oh, you didn't know. So
I didn't know until after the fact. No, I'm way on the back of the tail boom. They're 10, 15 feet, something like that, away from me, in front of me. And so I'm way back in the back, and I've got guys. You've got the tail boom comes out of the back of the helicopter, and you got 2 horizontal fins, that stick out. And there's 2 guys on each fin, and I'm on the back end, and so I've got 4 people up in front of me blocking. I couldn't see anybody up there.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're supposed to be doing.
Okay.
Then there was a person in front kind of guiding, you know, walking in front, you know, making sure there's nobody in front of it going to get hit. And I'm just steering. I'm turning the fuselage left and right, back on the tail boom.
So you're just holding on to that.
I didn't even know it. I didn't even know it happened until after the fact.
Okay, well, but for goodness sakes, Mark. Okay, so it happens. Did somebody come over and say, you know, you just ran over that lady over there?
Well, she told our mutual friend that it happened, and I didn't find out about it until later on. She told our mutual friend what had happened, and my reply was, well, that's why it says no push right there.
So that day you didn't know about it?
I didn't know about it at the time. I found out about it later on.
So basically, by you doing that, Linda walked away with that pain, but at the same time,
it makes for a good story. She probably cussed me out for a week, but she was dating somebody else at the time, so I don't do things like that. I don't, you know,
that totally threw that guy out of the picture.
Oh, nah, not for a couple of months.
Oh,
but
well,
yeah, it was about 3 months later we were married.
You know, this brings a whole new, and I hate to say it brings a whole new sort of into perspective, because you know that whole caveman thing where they come in with the club and, oh, you Jane, me like clunk, clunk, club. This is not that necessarily, but it's a variation of that, because it's, you know.
Well, to be fair, the fuselage of that aircraft is kind of shaped like a club. So, you know.
That's such a great story, you know.
But it you know, it makes for a good story.
Heck yeah, that's awesome.
But, So it doesn't compete with your great grandfather getting killed by a trolley. But
well, it's two different. It's totally two different things,
oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, that's great.
And she and I think they were brand new boots that she was wearing at the time too. And if you know anything at all about army boots, they're highly polished. So I think I probably ruined a pair of boots.
Wow.
But that's okay. I paid for several pairs after that. So
well, if that's not a Shakespeare romance beginning, I don't know what it. That should that should have been the beginning of Top Gun Part 2.
Yeah.
The dude runs her over, and she's like, she's sitting at the infirmary saying, "He sure did run me over, but boy, I can't stop thinking about it." Maybe it's the pain. I don't know.
Well, okay, let's stop and think about it. If somebody ran over you with a helicopter, would you stop thinking about them? Probably not for the same reasons, but I'd still be thinking that son of a.
By the way, we do here at Trampled Underfoot Podcast. We do not give love advice, so we do not. What's the word? How was it that's supposed to be said? We do not authorize. What's that little saying?
Oh, no. I'll give you all kinds of advice. And my first bit of advice would be not to follow any of it. But I've got opinions. I give you advice all day long, but they are not the opinions of Harneal Media, the Makers Media Network, or anybody else that we're associated with. Speaking of Harneal Media, we have a website.
Yeah.
TrampledUnderfootPodcast.com. If you can stroll on over there and click on that Wayback Machine button, you can find all of our past episodes, everything we've ever posted from episode number 1. That's TrampledUnderfootPodcast.com. Sponsored by Steve Nealon over at Harneal Media, your one-stop online website shop. Need a website? Just with like a little web store to maybe post a few items for sale, or even create your own merch and, get going with t-shirts and coffee mugs and these gator faced masks, which are cooler than heck. And I love wearing mine around the shops downtown. That's harnealmedia.com.
And we're also going live every Tuesday on Spreaker.com. Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Spreaker, but I don't know why I said that. You totally I got lost. You know what I was thinking when you start, because you were going through that and you kept adding to it. When I used to play, with my buddies, so my friend Ramses would play the drums and he'd do a drum solo, and we'd all stop with all our instruments, and he'd go, and then he'd do these little like drum fills where you think he's about to go back into the song, and you're like jerk forward with your guitar, and then you hold yourself back and you're, oops, I almost screwed up and played the note, and you wait, and then he's about to, and then no, he keeps going. And we had to be like totally waiting for the whole thing. So it kind of ruined that whole thing. What was I going to say? On Facebook, we also have Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook. So go over to the Facebook page and press like and leave us some suggestions and stuff. We also post pictures and videos of the topics that we talk about of interest. And yeah, so I think that we had a good one. It was a nice conversation this evening. I hope you guys enjoyed it out there. Are any final last words?
I like turtles.
Okay. Take care, guys.
Have a good night, y'all. Thanks for hanging with us.